Hello, everyone. We're live, but I'm going to give it another moment to let everybody join this webinar, and then we'll get started. Good. So I think we've given enough time. Hello, and welcome to all of our viewers around the world. I'm Michael Waxman-Lenz. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the American Technion Society. And I must say, it's a little bit bittersweet to have this webinar today. We are 6 weeks into our speaker series, Live from Technion, webinars with Technion experts. Most of us, I don't think we expected to be physically separated from our family, colleagues, and friends for this long, as we continue to deal with the drastic changes to our everyday lives caused by COVID-19. But I have to say, these weekly seminars have brought me comfort and inspiration, and I've heard from many of you how much you enjoy seeing and hearing from the brilliant, dedicated Technion scientists who are mobilized not only the worldwide effort to find solutions for the current health crisis, but also seeking discoveries, innovations, and cures in other areas in order to meet the needs of generations to come. We feel very fortunate to be surrounded here in our Zoom webinar world by so many like-minded friends of the Technion and fellow lifelong learners, united by the belief that Technion is at the forefront of science and technology worldwide. So let me turn to our respected guest for today. There is a meaningful old quote that I like by Baruch Spinoza, a Dutch philosopher of Portuguese Sephardi origin, which says, if you want the present to be different from the past, study the past. And you'll find that today's speaker is a wonderful guide to the past and how it relates to the present. And as much as we experience today's environment as new and different for us, the past is no stranger to global pandemics. Like Greek soldiers were hit with a deadly influenza in 430 BCE, the earliest recorded pandemic. Europe and Asia were decimated by the Black Death in the 1300s. The cholera ran rampant in the 19th century. The global flu epidemics of 1980 and HIV, AIDS afflicted modern times. And a scholar like Professor Lev has much to study from the past. Let me give you just a quick summary of Professor Lev's biography. He was born in Haifa and earned all 3 degrees from Bar-Ilan University in both Jewish studies and life sciences. And I will emphasize that combination again in a moment. He started his career at the University of Haifa in 2004 and joined the Technion in October 2012. Now, he is trained as both as a historian and a field biologist. So from my perspective, Professor Lev epitomizes the interdisciplinary thinking of the Technion and has a very unique set of skills. He is the head of the Department of Humanities and Arts at the Technion, and he is an expert in the sacred Jewish manuscript known as the Cairo Geniza. His strong interdisciplinary focus, and listen to these combinations, he's combining archaeology with botany and the history of Middle Eastern medicine with pharmacology. And that has allowed him to study subjects that have seldom been researched together and to arrive at new historical insights. Besides that, he's building a medical library of medieval Jewish practitioners, and he's using and advancing the tools of digital humanities, which is a discipline at the intersection of computing technologies and the humanities. Let me also take the opportunity in welcoming Efraim Lev to acknowledge a dear friend of the Technion, Sonia Marshak of Chicago. Sonia has been the patron of Technion's programs in the arts and humanities for many years. She recently established the Technion's first endowed chair in humanities and has also supported performing arts on campus. I believe Efraim and Sonia have developed a close relationship over the past few years, and we thank Sonia deeply for her investments in Technion's future. So before we begin, let me, as usual, make some procedural instructions. Today's program will be conducted as an interview so that we can be sure to cover as many facets of Professor Lev's research. My colleague David Kivo will join us shortly for that. You're still invited to ask your questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of the webinar window, and we will get to any questions that have not been addressed at the end of the interview. This presentation is also being recorded, and a link will be sent to you within the next couple of days. So let's begin, and let me turn it over to David Kivo for the questions. David, are you there?
Yes, the usual aspect of starting with a Zoom call is making sure that you unmute and video yourself. And I just didn't cue it quite right. And we should have Professor Lev on video as well in a moment. I just wanted to, oh, there you are. Professor Lev, it is so good to see you. The last time that we saw one another was in, I think, late November, early December on the Technion campus where we met for lunch. And all of these occasions when we have a chance to meet in person with somebody, they're particularly special to me now because that's clearly not happening. And I wanted to wish you first Erev Tov, a good evening. And to all those who are with us, I think that we have participants from 15, 16 countries across all time zones. So to all of you who are joining us, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day, whatever time zone it may be. And I wanted to begin in reflecting on how Michael introduced you. So Professor Lev, you're described as both a field biologist and a historian. It's an unusual combination in terms of a background and one's career. And I wanted to begin by asking you, how does your background in these two distinct areas inform your present work?
That's a good question. I mean, it took many years to study. And actually, I started by studying Land of Israel studies. And one course of biology, struck me. I fell in love with the subject, and I started to study biology as minor and then as major. And later on, I wrote my thesis on the vegetal diet of the Neanderthal 60,000 years ago. So for that, you need both languages, both field of studies. And I think it is right for me because it's right to my character of going deep to various subjects and then make something different out of them.
It's very interesting. And so what you've done is, of course, used your background to help develop and grow the humanities program at the Technion. And I think for most every person who's on this call, Technion's prominence in Israel and worldwide is as a leading technology university. So
Absolutely.
Why does Technion also place such a strong emphasis on humanities education?
A few years ago, and actually many years ago it started, but few years ago, like 8 years ago, the Technion understood, the management understood, that they want their student to be open-minded. They want their student to be innovative. And in order to do it, you have to widen their horizons. You have to teach them some philosophy and some history and some archaeology and arts and other subjects. And until 8 years ago, you could study these courses, but since then you have to study. You have to take 3 courses of humanities. You take more. You have to take 2 courses of sport, which is the only university in Israel. It used to be compulsory, but not anymore, just at the Technion. And we at the Technion understand that you know, a healthy body and healthy and open mind goes with engineering and science. And I think it proves itself. I mean, you can see our student, our graduate, what they've done in technology and science in Israel and all over the world.
Yeah, and I know the people who have joined us for today's conversation really would like to hear more about your research as it relates to pandemics, but allow me to ask just one more question, because
Sure.
Around humanities at the Technion and the current modality of teaching. So yeah, you make an interesting point that the education at the Technion should include multiple dimensions, including sports, including history. Yet, from what we know, since about the last week of March, or maybe a little bit before that, the Technion is now offering 100% of all its classes online. And I wanted to ask you to reflect, how has it been? How has teaching in a virtual realm affected the teaching of humanities classes at the Technion?
This was an amazing challenge. We understood a week before the semester started that we're going to go online, and some of our teachers are not young and they are not working with Zoom or even with Moodle. So I asked all the lecturers to give me, to think about it. I gave them a few days and write a program. How do they going to teach languages, sport, painting, the orchestra, the choir, the jazz, and so on? Some of them say, no way, no way, but they did. And we're talking about 8,000 students that study each semester in our department. It's amazing. And we managed to do it all, everything but the sport. The Technion didn't want to do sport online due to, you know, legal problem. If somebody breaks something, he can sue and so on. But all the rest is working, and it's unbelievable. I mean, you know, drama, how to teach drama through the Zoom, but it is working. Or jazz, you have to teach them and have a concert at the end of the semester. Yeah.
That is really incredible, and time permitting, and just as a reminder, please, to all the people who are joining us right now, feel free to use the Q&A section, which is on the bottom strip of your Zoom window, to ask questions, because you're very much part of this conversation as well. And we'd like for you and your questions and concerns to also be reflected in today's conversation. And as much as I'd love to continue talking with you about the resilience of Israel and how that's reflected at the Technion, I'd like to transition to your research, medicine and pandemics. And let me begin with this one, Professor, which is, you have studied medicine throughout the ages, particularly in the Middle East. And I'm curious if you could offer some reflections that we can draw upon right now from history about how the coronavirus pandemic compares to the experiences from earlier times.
Okay. Let's start with saying that modernity has a toll. I mean, we are living more dense. We can cross oceans and mountains and desert that people 200 years ago couldn't do, or it would take them a lot of time. Mm-hmm. And this changes all. I mean, we are very sophisticated and we have a good medical knowledge and ways to treat people. But, you know, a small virus like that, if it happened 400 years ago, I think people wouldn't feel it too much because, you know, they live far away from each other. Maybe in the cities there will be more people dying, but unlike today. Now, and we see, you know, Africa and Asia, even though they're very dense over there, but they live usually far away from each other, and they're not that sophisticated or that modern, and the pandemic hit them less than, you know, the Western world, the modernized world.
What do you mean by hit them less?
Oh, pardon?
What do you mean that the impact of it was less than compared to the modern world?
I mean, see the numbers. I mean, less people were affected, worse are dying. Or we don't know, because actually nowadays we can tell who is dying from corona, and actually our focus is only on the death toll of the corona. At the other people that die naturally or die from other things and they're not at the news and so on. So there is a bias here, in my opinion, of course. Okay.
It's really interesting. You know, last night I was watching a documentary about Mars, and in the times of antiquity, Mars was considered to be a god, an angry god, or a god like a jester. And that got me thinking that, you know, historically, societies also attached the supernatural or the divine to the spread of disease or the causes of death. And of course, today we know that the causes are viruses and bacteria. Yet, I think the common denominator between back then and now is that we're actually equally as scared. And I'm wondering, are there other lessons, particularly from your research of the Middle East and medicine in the Middle East, that could give us some guidance at this time about how we as a society can respond to things that appear beyond our control and that it can impact our health?
I think one of the worst thing that will happen from this pandemic is the economic disaster that stay with us many years, you know, and we'll see, in my opinion, we'll see many people commit suicide because they'll have nothing to eat or other financial problems. So I think what we can learn from history that first of all, that we're stronger than we think. I mean, our societies, even though sometimes they're breaking, like happened in Europe, in Black Death, you know, tens of millions of people died there. People just, you know, left their religions and did all kinds of crazy things in order to survive or in order to enjoy their last minutes and so on. And it was like at the end of the world, but, you know, Europe got over it and humanity can get over. So as long as we have hope and as long as we keep together and support each other, we can get over it, you know, and the economic crisis will get better and better. You had a huge economic crisis in the States at the 20s, and then 2008 was terrible. But now we're doing much better after 12 years. So it's ups and downs, and I think that we'll get over it, and I hope it will be quicker thanks to modernity and science.
Yeah, you know, you bring up an important word that we all want to hold on to right now, and that's hope, the hope for the future. And for those who are connected to the Jewish tradition, we just finished Passover last week, and we recall the plagues in Egypt. And the Bible clearly references the spreads of other diseases. So I'm just wondering also from a Middle East perspective, what lessons about hope and resilience and moving forward can we draw upon from those past epochs that we could draw upon today?
I think that we have many examples, like, you know, the creation of the State of Israel without hope, you know, the beginning of Zionism, think about it. There were some, very extreme hopes, like in Bar Kokhba, a revolt and, fighting the Romans, which ended badly. But the togetherness of the Jews and other society,
Mhm.
togetherness, physically togetherness, called the pandemic, but a spirit togetherness will get us out of it. That's what I believe.
So I'm just looking at the questions that have come our way, and
Sure.
I can group them right now into two areas. One is a lot of questions about humanities at the Technion, and I'd like to get to those in just a moment. But also some questions here around COVID-19 and your research. And there's one question here that I find particularly interesting is, do pandemics and other such health crises through the ages also encourage more beliefs in the past? Can you reflect on the desire to attach the supernatural or the divine or the evil with times of health crises in the past?
Yeah, I think that people either go, blame the supernatural or the gods, or the gods are, angry and they do it. And you can find it in all kinds of religions, from paganism to Jewish and the Islam and so on. Or on the other side, you ask God to help you and you trust in God, and it gives you power. And this is very important. Even today, I think we know, that if you believe, you get stronger physically. And sometimes it helps you to get over a very bad medical condition. So I hope I answered your question, but this is what my perception.
Good. Let's turn also to your work about the Cairo Geniza and the study of ancient medicine. Why don't we begin with the following, which is an area of your expertise. What is the Cairo Geniza?
Okay, so allow me to share with you a very short presentation. And so I will take you back 1,000 years ago. The Muslim control a big portion of the ancient world. They control half of Africa and Arabia and even India and Asia Minor, and part of southern Spain. And the capitals were changing, started with Damascus, with the Umayyad, and then Baghdad. And then at the end of the 10th century, Cairo became the center of the world, of the Muslim world, economic center, political center, and so on. And Jews came from all over. Jews that knew languages, Jews that knew how they were good traders, and they were good administrators, and they were good physicians, and so on. And many of them came to Cairo. And over there, they had few communities. One of them is the communities of the Israelite, of the Rabbanite Jews that came from Israel, Syria, and so on. The name of this synagogue, for example, is Ben Ezra. And the Jews in the East and also in the West, until present day, used to collect all the worn Bibles and Sidurs and so on, and bury them. So this community, they started by burying these materials, as you can see here. This is from Bet HaTfutzot. At a certain point, they renovate the synagogue and they built a room at the women attic. And you can see here the room. This is 2007. I visited there. And in this room, for almost 1,000 years, materials were accumulating. And in the 19th century, people like Solomon Schechter, that I'm sure some of you know the name, a Romanian rabbi that was the Talmudic reader in Cambridge, heard about it. It's a beautiful story. I don't have the time to tell it here. And with the help of Charles Taylor, which was the master of St. John College in Cambridge, he went to Cairo, got a friend with the local rabbi, and I'm talking about the 19th century, 1896, and he brought with him almost 250,000 fragments, manuscript, like that, you know, and this is only 70% of the Cairo Geniza. All the rest are spread all over the world, especially in universities and libraries, in 70 different collections, and you can find there anything, you know, Talmud, and over here it's a piyut, and over here it's a Bible, 1,000 years old. And art, this is how you would teach kids to, you know, the Aleph Bet, and all kind of drawings that the Jewish kids did. Even, you see, the Jewish bobsfog over here, bob sponge over here. And the Geniza contain everything, not just religious stuff. It contains everything, and it's a treasure trove for historians. We can learn every aspect of their life. It's written in various languages, mainly Hebrew, Arabic, and Judeo-Arabic. And, you know, many scholars use and study the Geniza. I'm focusing on the history of medicine. And just for example, these are two lists of materia medica that I found there and studied out of 70, out of which I could reconstruct the materia medica, the medicinal substances that they were using, that were in the pharmacies. Another thing is a prescription, practical prescription. This one, as you can see, was written by a Jewish physician after we checked Jewish patient, and you know, the patient went to a Jewish pharmacist to do it. The letters are Hebrew, however, the language is Judeo-Arabic. And it is amazing, you know, to see, and I had to figure out what it was used for, because no names, no symptoms, because everything was known to patient, doctor, and pharmacist. We have more things like many books. With them, I'm going to reconstruct the medical library, like 100 notebooks, part of notebooks that teach us how they transfer medical knowledge. Letters, and by the way, this letter was written by Maimonides in his hand, and he gives a prescription or recipe for headache, and many other things. I know that we're short on time, so I will leave these images for the next questions.
Thank you. And I suppose the question that comes to many people's minds is, what can we learn from these texts that's applicable to our knowledge and our situation today? I'm curious what your perspective is on that.
First of all, we know about the ways that they were treating people and diagnosed people. And it took a long time. They were talking with the people, and they were checking them slowly, and they understood the whole background thing that nowadays not, in most time, you know, physician doesn't have the time to do it. Start with that. The second thing is we know about their materia medica, medicinal substances, which about 85% of them were plants, of plants origin, and between 7 to 10% were from animal origin and inorganic minerals. So we can put the minerals aside, even though some of them are still used, like zinc. Zinc is still was used to treat eye disease, and we do it until present day. And some of them were, of course, nonsense from a scientific point of view. We'll put aside the animals part, which is amazing story, but but the medicinal plants, we can identify them, and this is what I did, you know, my PhD thesis and years later in the Gnisa. And then you go online and you look for scientific articles and research, and you see that in most cases they were right. I mean, if you check the active material, it does the job. The problem was that they could only see and treat the symptoms. They didn't know what is happening, you know, inside in the systems. And this we know now. You know, but many of these plants, by the way, are still used in traditional medicine on one hand, and some of them were used to produce modern drugs. We just synthesize them in laboratories and factories.
So if I'm not mistaken, part of the classes that you teach at the Technion focus on study of the Cairo Geniza. And I'm just curious from your perspective, why you feel it was beneficial for today's engineers and scientists, and particularly medical professionals, to have a broader understanding of it.
Okay. I'm teaching two courses. One is the life of the Jews in the Mediterranean, which is very interesting because it's all aspects of the Jews that were minorities among minorities, because there were many Christians that lived under the Muslims, and it tells us a lot about present day, you know, because, you know, we are Israel, we are surrounded by many Arab countries. Jews lived in Arab countries until 67, and some Jews until present day. And many students in my class, you know, are Muslims. You can find Muslims and Druze and Christians. And it is very interesting, you know, to see how people used to live together. Because being a Jew in the medieval period was much better under the Muslims than in Christian Europe. So they get all kinds of perspective, and from there I can lead them to different places. Now, the other course is history of medicine and pharmacology. Mm-hmm. And since in many cases from the classical period to medieval period, many inventions were made by physicians, because being a scholar at the classical period, you know, in many times, many examples, you were a physician as well. So from there, I get them to think that they actually study mathematics or engineering, you know, and Muslim scholars, Roman scholars, Greek scholars, and medieval scholars. Okay, and of course, Jewish scholars such as Maimonides and so on. So this is only the basic, but I go to various places and various inventions, and it gets to them, even though the main idea, again, is to widen their horizons, to learn different methods of thinking and research and writing and even reading, to teach them, you know, critical reading, which is very important, because some of them are, you know, either computer geeks or mathematicians. But from very early age, this is what they do. They don't go right or left. Or even some you know, history of the Jews, or history of the Muslims, or some philosophy.
That's really just a fascinating perspective. And again, it makes me think about the Passover story. You know, when we conclude the Seder, the Exodus story has that beautiful invocation, you know, next year in Yerushalayim. It's a powerful message, you know, after reading about 10 plagues, 40 years in the desert, and the hardship from back then and how we relate it to today. And I'm just curious what you also want today's Technion students to absorb in terms of historical wisdom, to give us resilience and different perspectives as they go forward in their careers in technology and medicine and elsewhere.
I'm not sure I understood your question.
Oh, obviously I said it much
rephrase.
Okay, yeah, make it simpler, right? So just the summary of it is, how does historical wisdom help the scientists and engineers and medical professionals of the future?
Okay, I think that being innovative is something that you do usually when you want to solve a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So if you stick to it, and you see the state of Israel was born 3 years after the Holocaust. It was, you know, a huge disaster, and some people even lost their belief in God and so on. But they had the togetherness, doing that they want to build a place for themselves, even if it will be hard, even if they die and so on. And I think this focus and working together in groups, and this is very important, and very important for Israelis in general, and I think this is part of the reason of the successful of the Israeli high tech, that we learn from early age that if we work together, we can get somewhere. Like the Jews, they want to get out of Egypt and get to Israel. So if you perform a group and then you learn it in the army, that you have to stick to each other in order to do amazing things sometime and survive in most cases. So, you know, being focused and the togetherness and the aim, or the mutual aim, is very important in my opinion.
Thank you, thank you. I'm going to take some questions that have been coming
Sure.
our way, and we have so many of them. So let me pick one that I believe can encapsulate several of the questions here. We had one here about the Geniz. I just wanted to find it again. Oh, here's a really wonderful one. So can you share a little bit more about the medical practices in history and whether the Technion is able to actually draw upon that information and revisit it from a modern lens? In other words, if you look at something like the Geniza or what have you, is there content or there ideas in there that have modern applicability?
Not from technological point of view. So we can take, for example, the plants or find plants
the
that
plants, the zinc.
studied, yeah, and go on and research.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, there are some professors at the Technion that there are doctors at the School of Medicine that we work together, for example, okay, with a cancer patient, okay? Mm-hmm. So I'm not claiming that we can find a solution for cancer by studying, you know, ancient texts. Mm-hmm. We can take plants that were used in the past to ease pain, mm-hmm. and to help with, you know, when people lose their appetite and other things, you know, after in the mouth, mm-hmm. And help them. And once you help the patient, you know, to ease these symptoms of the chemotherapy, they come and they get the therapy as needed, and it is very helpful. And I had, you know, a mutual MA student with some physicians, mm-hmm. And even a PhD student, you know, that finished a very nice work by using plants, you know, not to cure the cancer, but to help the patient and to improve the chances to be cured, for example.
Oh, sorry. Sorry for the glitch. You paused for a moment. It could have been on my end. I'd like to
Good questions.
I'd like to ask you two questions in which I need you to get out your crystal ball so you can look at the future a little bit. And the first one is, plagues affect culture and society. And in what areas do you feel that we as a human race in contemporary times need to make significant changes to our lives to not only be ready for future pandemics, but in a way know how to handle them, because so many of us are having a really hard time with the social isolation and the fear of the unknown. And I'm wondering if there's something from the past that can help us prepare for the future.
I think that if we change our values, for example, and care more, beside, of course, you know, all the regular thing that we forgot about, you know, like washing hands and do, because we are shaking hands, we are hugging, we are kissing all over, which is great. I love it. I think it will take a while until we get back to it. And it is very helpful to each one of us. I mean, it gives you strength to be hugs and so on. But I think that these hugs are changing ways. For example, at Yom HaShoah, Memorial Day, 3 days ago, you know, our chief of staff of the Israeli army and many police officers and soldiers came to places that old people lived and stuck, you know, for 6 weeks. And they went there, you know, and salute them, which is amazing. You know, it's a way, instead of hug them, they were doing something symbolic, something else. So we'll have to change. And I'm sure that each one of us know to know nowadays how pressure is to be with the family and you know, to drive less and save, you know, our planet and many other things. If we'll be smart enough to stick to this idea or to these things, the future will be much better. And I think the government will have to take care, because always we say in Israel, that unfortunately we always prepare the army for the war. So here we should change. Now, the course that I'm teaching, the last 20 years, you know, all over the history of medicine, the class of the Black Death, I always tell the student, you know, that if you want to sleep well at night, don't think about what I'm telling you. But, you know, imagine that in a good farm in China, a new virus will come, a new kind of flu, a virus will come. And then one person get on board of a plane. And when he get down, 500 person getting on other planes and go down to the tube and so on, it will be a disaster. Don't think about it, but you know that it might happen. And unfortunately, it happened. Okay, so, yeah.
Yeah, you know, just a couple more questions to help summarize what we've learned today. And that is, look, when we at the American Technion Society have dealt in the past with emergency campaigns and what have you, the focus has always been on a very specific situation that is occurring in Israel. Today, the impact that is happening in Haifa is no different than it is for most any city of the people who are on today's call. And again, just looking into your crystal ball, do you think that we as a human race will be able to draw from a sense of togetherness and a sense of a common pain and a common set of fears that we've had to come together and be, you know, more united as humanity? Can we bring peace to the Middle East as a result of some of the shared experiences that we've had? What does the past think about that?
No, unfortunately, I don't think that this will happen, even though it is very quiet now.
Yeah.
You know, and we're helping, we're sending Gaza Strip all equipment, and we are doing their checks.
Yeah.
You know, the labs, the army, the IDF is doing their corona tests, which is very funny, but you know, for years we are supplying them with electricity and water and take care, and they, you know, shoot missiles on us. But let's put, even though it's not politics, let's put it aside. I think, you know, that we need to think about the future generation and the young ones. You know, they did not they were not affected in most cases by the disease, but they will be affected by the economic disaster.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that the students at Technion are going to have a huge problem, you know, them and their parents.
Mm-hmm.
Pay the tuition, you know, and to continue to study, and they need a lot of help, no doubt about it. And we have many students, they are very good. Some of them are coming from very low background, you know, not strong economically background.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they need all the support that we can give them. We'll do it from academic point of view, and we'll need, you know, each one of you doing it from other side.
Yes, and we do have emergency campaigns for Technion research and for Technion student needs. Obviously not the focus on today's call, and so it's just a very passive mention of it as opposed to one that we're making a focus here. You know, a related question. Look, I think what we're also seeing is these two poles going on right now. One, an increased sense of insularity. Borders are important and separations of people. On the other hand, yeah, we're all in this together. There's something tragically democratic about the coronavirus, because if you look at the world map, we're all affected. And so, again, looking at the past and where your areas of expertise lie, Professor Lev, what lessons are there for society, for family, for human connections that we can draw upon from the past, or even your own thoughts on that? I ask it as much for me as I do for the audience.
Yeah. Okay. From evidence from the Black Death, you know, because each pandemic leaves a lot of marks, not just, you know, DNA, the bones of the death, but also songs and stories and paintings and other things. And I found in the Geniza one book that was written by Jewish physician from the 14th, 15th century. So he was a physician and he experienced the Black Death. And he beautifully described the way that he felt, you know, useless. He didn't know what to do. So from the research, I know that some physicians just, you know, left everything and ran away. But others, and as many brave physicians nowadays, you know, in New York and Tel Aviv, they work days and night, not always, you know, fully protected, and they just give everything. You know, they're so compassionate and so helpful. And I think that you see many of these, like the Prime Minister of Ireland. I read he's a physician, and he's giving, you know, a shoulder, and he's going to work in hospital and so on. When you look around and you see in Israel, so many people are volunteering, you know, they're out of jobs and they go and they bring food to the old people, and, you know, soldiers bringing food to ultra-Orthodox that don't go to the army and hate it. They hate the army, they hate the state of Israel, but they go and bring them things. So this might change, and the same with Arab villages and cities. You know, soldiers are bringing food and they recycle, giving masks and so on. So I hope it will break some barriers in the Israeli society. I believe it will, really. I'm very optimistic on this side.
Thank you. And before I turn it back over to Michael, one last question that encapsulates what several people have been asking, a fun question, and that is, how do you teach performing arts and drawing and other subjects online on Zoom? People want to know. They want to know how you do it.
It's amazing. You know, the drawing, she's an artist, but she would come from Tel Aviv to the Technion, and we have a place that was built by the support of Sonia, you know, a place where we paint and do everything. And she didn't want at the beginning, and I pushed her. to do it, and she needed it. And she's saying now it's amazing because she's in her workshop now, at her atelier, and she can show them all kind of things and work in progress. And she can give them, you know, the object, they're painting and they're sending her images. The same with the music. You know, he gave them things to do and play, and they record themselves and return to him. And it is really very, very special and unique. And they were very innovative and original. Really, I salute the teacher in the Department of the Humanities and the Art at Technion. They've been great so far.
That is really fantastic. And it will be a pleasure to see you again the next time I'm in Haifa or you're in the US. Professor Lev, thank you very much for your incredible insights on a whole host of perspectives from present day, the Technion, to the way we can learn from the past to inform our present. I'd like to turn it back over now to Michael Waxman-Lin, CEO of the American Technion Society. So Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, David. Before I close it out, I'd love to ask one question that I saw in the QA panel by Hagit, and I don't know whether it's a yes or no answer. You talked a lot about superstition, and she wanted to know whether there were witch hunts in the Middle East in the Middle Ages as in Europe. I'm just intrigued by this question. Do you know?
In the Middle East, that's a great question. No, I don't know. But
good. So there's a
check
new
if-
research project.
I'll have to check. Yeah.
So I love the question. So thank you so much to you, Professor Lev. We don't really hear very often from the humanities and the arts at Technion, given the focus of Technion, especially you as the head of the department. We really appreciate it because it shows that your research, right, combines, brings together art and science, and really for me, it illustrates that areas that were previously not understood and gives a rise, from my perspective, for new and creative ways to interact with our world, maybe even blurring traditional boundaries and opening new avenues for discovery and expression. To our audience, as usual, I hope that you found the webinar informative and thought-provoking. And as a reminder, the presentation has been recorded and a link will be sent to you in the next couple of days. We look forward to having you again in 2 weeks on Thursday, May 7th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 11 o'clock Central Time, and 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Our next webinar is entitled The Israeli Advantage in Conquering COVID-19, a Technion alumnus leads innovative approach, which is prominent Technion alum, Dr. Yael Zimlichman, who is the Chief Medical Officer and Chief Innovation Officer at Sheba Medical Center. So I hope we can welcome you on Thursday, May 7th. And you will, of course, receive an invitation to this upcoming webinar and all the upcoming speakers in our Live from Technion webinar series. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your support of the Technion, and please stay safe and healthy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Professor.
And thank you very much, Professor Lev. I should have added
My
that
pleasure.
again.
It was a
Thank you.
pleasure.
Bye now.